Hello and welcome to the Garden Design Show. In this episode we're going to look at exactly how you position garden statues, sculptures and focal points in the garden. And I'm going to show you how you can get me to design your garden for free. And I also have a cunning little trick that will help you dramatically improve any plant border, even if it's quite messy, without needing to move a single plant or do any real gardening at all. Welcome to the Garden Design Show. It's my mission to demystify design to make it easier for you to create your dream garden. Properly planning your garden is as vital as properly planning your home. I'm Rachel Matthews and I've been a professional international garden designer for over 20 years. I'm also a best-selling author and I teach garden design online. Now, in our last episode, we visited the fabulous Kitty Harry sculpture garden in the foothills of the Andalusian mountains in southern Spain. Now, while I was there, I asked Kitty what were her top tips from an artist's perspective of how you position statues in the garden. So we're going to listen to her tips first, and then afterwards I'll give you my perspective from a garden designer's point of view. So I'll give you all my top tips of how you can best position sculptures and statues in your garden.
How you place it in the garden is you've got to have room to walk around it, preferably, and also think about things like light and shadow, and be very careful not to put it under trees that drop a lot of stuff like sticky leaves, and because they will discolor sculptures.
Yes, that's something you don't often think about, is it, when you first place it? You normally it's, oh, I've got a gap, I'll put it here, but there is a lot more that you need to think about.
Yeah, you need to think about things like that, and also protecting the sculpture with some sort of protective covering. There's very many things you can use. On this, I've actually used a perfectly cheap garden variety protector.
And is that like a resin that goes in?
Well, it's more like a type of varnish, I think.
Right, okay. Because it's got a lovely matte finish. It hasn't made it shiny.
It hasn't changed the surface of it at all. But I noticed that this particular sculpture used to get bits of mold on it in the spring, after the wet season.
Yes, because it's quite porous.
But now it hasn't had that problem. So this is just the stuff you would paint terracotta tiles, for example, to keep them clean.
Great tip.
So but different sculptures will need different types of treatment.
So some great tips from Kitty there, lots of things that I would never have thought of. So that's how an artist places sculptures, but what about from a garden designer's perspective? Okay, so from my point of view as a garden designer, there are three main ways to position a statue, sculpture or focal point in your garden. Now the first one is at the end of things, so at the end of the view, so at the end of the garden, like in this picture here, the face mask on the wall just draws your eye right to the end. It's almost like a visual full stop. But as you'll notice from this slightly different angle, there are various little focal points on the way to the main one. There's the group of little pebbles there, and then there's the group of pots, and that all helps draw your eye to that main focal point at the end. And as you can see, as the garden becomes more and more established and grown up, the face mask really does pull your eye right to the bottom there. And here's another example at the end of things. This time it's a path. As you can see, you're part way through constructing this driveway and front garden with the pergola. Now once the pergola's in, you can see that it's kind of a bit dead at the end. Now obviously it'll look better when the plants grow up, but still it needs something to draw the eye. So just by putting in this simple bench, it makes a dramatic difference. And as I say, once the planting is established, this will look wonderful. It gives you a reason to walk down the end of that path. There's a reward at the end, something to sit on. Now even if you never ever sit on that bench, visually it still draws the eye and it still makes it interesting. And here's one more example of the end of. You can see we've used the arches and pergolas here to take your eye to the end of the garden, but the wall is very dominant and we weren't able to render it. But by just putting three simple face masks on that the clients brought back from their holiday, it just makes a tremendous difference to that wall and makes it a lot more interesting. And the second place I like to use statues, sculptures and focal points is in the middle of something. So here's some examples of that. And you can see a very simple bird bath in the middle of this circular lawn is very effective. And you can see in this garden as well, at the middle where the cross section of paths meet, that's a perfect place for a focal point. And in the middle of this tiny modern courtyard garden, this enormous slate monolith makes an amazing focal point. But focal points don't always have to be raised up, they can be flat, as this paving example shows. And our last example of a focal point in the centre of a garden is this lovely modern water feature. It's the perfect focal point as you walk through the gate, and then it leads on to the rest of the garden. Now, the third and final way that I like to use statues, sculptures and focal points in the garden is something I normally only teach to my Great Garden Formula course students. Now, I've been working on that a lot recently because the new version 3.0 is out in the new year. So while I've been working on it, I thought, well, I might as well share this with you because it really does take the art of placing statues and sculptures to the master level. Now, if you look at these three gardens, you'll see it's the same shape plan, and if you look at the arrows on these plans, you can see the direction and movement that the shapes that I've used in the design create in the garden. Now, you may be wondering why movement is important, and really a well-designed garden unfolds like the plot of a well-written story. So if it's a whodunit, for example, you don't want to know who done it right at the beginning. So if you don't see the entire garden in one go, it creates more interest, and the shapes that you use, you can steer the view and way that people visually and functionally use your garden. And to really make the movement of these shapes create successful, one thing that you can do is at every change in direction you can place a focal point, and that focal point, like I said earlier, acts as a visual full stop, and therefore you have a lot more control over how people view your garden. So if we look at the next image, you'll see what I mean. FP stands for focal point, and you can see if we put a little statue or pot or something, every time there's FP on the plan, your eye would then go from one to another until you reach the main focal point, which is the seating area at the end of the garden. Now, plan C just shows a very straight and dull garden. That's to highlight the difference that using different shapes can make. So it's A and B that really illustrate the point I'm trying to make. So if we now take a look at a real garden plan, you can see it's a really odd shaped garden, but we've gotten around it by the shapes that we've used. But also, rather than just looking straight to the end where there was a purple leaf tree with a focal point underneath it, you can see the positioning of the other focal points around the garden means that you're viewing the garden in stages rather than seeing everything in one go. And here's another example. There's various focal points in this garden, from the pot and cobbles at the front to the palm tree and another pot and a seating area at the back. And if we look at the drawing with the arrows, your eye is automatically doing this, but if we sort of break it down, you can see how you go from one element to the next as you look down the garden, and that just slows down the route of passage, if you like, visually. So here's another example, and as you can see, if you've got a long, narrow, skinny garden, moving from one side to another is even more vital, and we've been able to do that with the shapes we've used, but also these focal points. Your eye goes from one to another, and that zigzag will make the garden feel a lot wider. So they're the main three ways that I use to position statues and sculptures correctly in the garden. But I do have one last tip for you. Now, it's a little bit cheeky and a bit sneaky, but sculptures and statues can make an amazing get out of jail card. So let me show you what I mean. There are occasions where, try as you might to get a planting border correct, it just doesn't look anywhere near as good as you hoped, and sometimes it can be really difficult to figure out why, and also you can have lots of established plants and things that you just cannot move. It's just not practical. So what you can do is use statues and sculptures as a way of giving, again, that visual full stop, but because they're a very defined form, they're not all soft and fluffy like plants are, having something solid in a planting border just gives immediate clarity. So take a look at this photograph of a Chelsea flower garden. Now, this would be a gold medal winner, so the best of the best at the Chelsea Flower Show. Now, for my eyes, I would say that this planting border is actually a little bit on the messy side. Now, let me demonstrate by taking the urn out and now have a look at the planting scheme. Doesn't it look different? Suddenly there isn't quite the clarity there. I mean, they're still very pretty flowers, but it's nowhere near as effective of when you've got that solid focal point at the end. So this is my first garden I ever did for my very brave parents, and I really struggled with this planting border. It drove me insane. The number of times I dug everything up, I moved it, I just could not get it to look right. So now it doesn't look too bad in this photograph because everything's flowering, but when it wasn't, it was just such a mess. That was because at that time, because it was my first garden, I hadn't learnt that actually the flowers that a plant has, or the foliage, actually aren't the key to creating a good, stunning planting scheme. So in the end I just gave up and had to cheat. So I stuck a pot in and this bench, and you can't quite see it in this picture, but there was a couple of dark green obelisks, and that just sort of saved the day. And the same with this border, these were too established to dig up as well, so this wicker sculpture just really helped. So planting schemes are really difficult to get right, so don't feel down if you're struggling with a particular border and you feel that you're just not getting anywhere. This is a really simple fix. And if you want to learn the real art of putting plants together in a slightly counterintuitive way, because like I say, it doesn't rely on what type of flowers they have, then do take a look at the plant design workshop where I give you a live demonstration on exactly how you put plants together. So there you go. They're my top tips for how you can best position statues, sculptures and focal points in your garden. There's quite a bit to it when you sort of dig down deep into it, but it's those subtleties that really make a difference in the garden. And if you can get those right, you really will create a fantastic space in your garden. So all that and more is covered in the Great Garden Formula. And I will warn you though, when version 3.0 comes out, the price is going to go up by over $100. So if you want to get it at a bargain price, do get it before the new year. And anyone that has version 2.0 will automatically get all the upgrades and improvements and additional material and masterclasses that I'm adding in the 3.0 version. Now, I mentioned at the beginning there was an opportunity for you to have me design your garden for free, so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that and how you go about entering your garden. Now, some of you may have already read this on the blog. I published it about a month or so ago. I've been having this long-running debate with my mother for about the last 5 or 6 years. Ever since I started Successful Garden Design, she's been saying to me, look, I don't think everybody wants to learn how to design their garden. Can't you just produce a set of blueprints that people can then just put in their garden and job done? And I've kind of said, no, you can't do that, because every garden is different. You know, there's different changes in level, there's different shapes and sizes, people's tastes are different. It just can't be done. But anyway, bless her, she's rather persistent, and she has carried this discussion on with me for years. And just recently I have been kind of coming around to her viewpoint. I think I've discovered a way that I could do this. Create a set of blueprints that can be used in different size and shaped gardens, and how they can be adjusted to suit people's individual tastes and ideas. So what I'm looking for is some guinea pig gardens. I need some test subjects. Now, as Successful Garden Design is viewed all the way around the world, I want a series of gardens from all over the world to test out my ideas on. It can be any shape, any size, any style of garden. It doesn't matter what you've got there now. I want to have a look at your garden to see if my ideas will work. So I'm going to set aside some time in the new year to have a play with this and see if the ideas I've got in my head will work on paper. So in the meantime, I would love for you to send me a photograph of your garden so that I can see exactly what it is you're dealing with. If your garden is chosen, you will get not just one design done for free, but various designs. I'm going to try and come up with at least 4 or 5 for each garden that I do. So if this is something you'd like to take part in, there's a link beneath this video, or you can go to successfulgardendesign.com/show-me-your-garden. So, future Garden Design Show episodes, I'm no longer going to be sticking to a definite schedule. I'm going to do them as and when I'm inspired to. There's something that I desperately want to tell you, or if you write in and tell me what you'd like to see on future shows, if you inspire me, then I will produce an episode just for you. So if you'd like me to carry on a little bit sooner than I'm probably likely to, then do leave me a comment beneath this video on what you'd like to see in future episodes. So until we meet again, good luck with your garden. Do send me some photographs, and if you'd enjoyed this video, do please share it and spread the word.